So my latest crazy idea for a project is adding backup lights to my 65 Chevy C10 pickup. In 1965, Chevy pickup trucks did not have backup lights as standard equipment. It was an option. It became standard in 66, but in 65 it was still an option. In 66, there was a factory installed backup light right here, a round one. And I could go get one, a pair of those and cut a hole in my fender if I want and install it, and then I'd have backup lights. But that seems too easy, and I kind of like to do customizing when I can. So here's my idea for this project. This is the standard taillight lens. And if you look closely, you can see that in the bottom, there's a Chevrolet bow tie shape molded into the lens. So what my idea is to take this lens, take it out, and then cut out this shape in here out of the red lens, okay? Take it completely out, and then fill it with a clear lens, and then construct a light bucket that would go behind this area that would include bright white LED lights. And then I would hook those LED lights up to my backup wiring. So when the gear shift is shifted into reverse, there's a switch that sends power to the backup lights. And I have to install that wire as well because it's not in my truck, but I do have the switch. I installed that, and that will give me power to run these backup lights. So if I'm successful in creating this custom lens with the backup light integrated into the bow tie shape, that should be pretty cool. So that's my project. Let's see if I can succeed at it. Okay, so I need to cut this shape out, but I want to leave this raised ridge in place. And then I can cut the lens, the clear lens, out exactly the right size to slip into that space, and this ridge will make it look kind of like it was done in the factory. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drill a hole in the middle of this shape right here, probably 1/8 of an inch hole, and then I'm going to go out to my shop and use my jigsaw and hopefully cut this shape out. It shouldn't be too hard to do. If I use the jigsaw, that should give me pretty good control. And if I don't get it right up to the edge of that ridge, I'm just going to file it, use a file and file it all flat and square like I need it to. First of all, I got to drill a hole in there and make room for the jigsaw blade to go through. Okay, so I used my step drill to drill it down in there. These step drills are awesome. If you drill through and the hole doesn't look big enough, you can push it further or get a little bigger hole. If you don't like that one, you keep going until you get the size you want. And this is the size I ended up with. I think that should be big enough to fit the jigsaw blade through. If not, I'll just drill it some more. Okay, so the jigsaw, got it out. A little bit of an issue here and there. It was, at one point it was starting to melt the plastic instead of cutting it, so it got kind of mangled up a little bit right there, but hopefully I can clean it up with a file. So that's the next step, is to go in and try to file that all out, flat and smooth and straight. I don't know if I'm going to be able to retain that molded border or not. We'll see how it goes. Okay, so I'm using an assortment of flat files and needle files, mostly the flat ones, to try to flatten out the shape here. It's going very slowly. I'm not sure if it's because the lens is maybe an original and it's kind of old and brittly. Maybe I should have tried doing this on a brand new lens, but it's just an experiment. So I'm going to kind of keep grinding away, filing it and sanding it down until I get it smooth and square, and go from there. Okay, so back at it. I think I've done as much as I can with cutting that shape out like I want it. And it's not really perfect, but let's see how it goes. It'll work. So the next step is to make a compartment within the lens where I can house the light bulbs that I'm going to use to make the backup light. I want it to be separate from the rest of the light so that when the backup light goes on, it's not showing through the red and making the red light, glow. I want it to just be the white light coming through the backup light lens here. So I have to separate out this area from the rest of the lens so that just the backup light lights up this section. So I made a little template out of paper, but I'm gonna create this little box in the bottom that will house the lights and separate this section of the light from the rest of it. So I made this little pattern, I cut it out, I folded it, and I think it's gonna work in there. And then I traced that onto this piece of aluminum flashing. This is kind of stuff you get for making flashings on your roof or your gutters or something. Just lightweight aluminum. And so I traced the pattern onto that, and then just using scissors, I was able to cut out this aluminum, marked all where it's going to be folded and whatnot. And my first one I made is here, and it's made to fit in this bottom section. To separate this part of the light from the rest of it. So I think that's going to work. Make this little aluminum box. And then what I think I'm going to do, once I get this figured out, is I'm going to paint the inside of the lens, inside here in the lower section. I'm going to paint it with black paint so that no light from these backup lights are going to go through this lens at all. I only want light going through the bow tie area. So I'm going to paint this section down here black so no light can go through and make it look like red. And then this box is going to be inserted like that. And then within this box, I'm going to place 3 LED lights wired together. Hopefully that'll give me enough brightness to make a decent backup light. Haven't quite decided how I'm going to do this yet. If I'm just going to solder wires together to make these all together and then feed a wire out through the box, to where it needs to go, or what. I'm also looking at some sockets I can use to plug these lights in case I need to replace them. But right now I'm thinking I'll just solder them together, feed the wires through a hole in the box, and then maybe just glue gun the whole unit into the taillight lens. Just glue gun it in so it's just one solid component with the backup lights, built in. I ordered some clear backup light lenses for a 67 to 72 Chevy truck. The backup lenses are clear, and I'm going to take those backup lenses and cut the shape out of them so that I have actual backup lens material used to make this Chevy shape. And so it'll be clear, but it'll be the kind of material that is used for backup lights. Hopefully that'll work, and I'll insert that in there and I'll glue that in. And then once that's in, then I can construct my electrical components into this box and insert it. And this is the first one, the prototype, so there's a few little issues with it, but I think it's going to work. I haven't decided yet how to pull the wires out from inside here, because it's going to come out of here and go into the bucket of the light. So it's going to go in here, and there's a little bit of room right in here, because see, here's here's the tail light, which is also an LED, which does not get hot. So there's probably plenty of room here to string some wires through to feed the backup lights. So there's where we're at. So back to the custom backup light project. I said previously that I ordered some backup light lenses for a 67 to 72 Chevy pickup that I was going to cut this shape out of, but they haven't arrived yet, and I'm tired of waiting. So I think I'm going to just use this old Mazda Miata tail light and cut a section out of it to make my bow tie shape to fit in there. I said before that I was going to paint this area black so that no light would come through, and I tried that. I painted a section of it, but it ended up making the lens all dark down here, and it didn't look right. It looked weird, like there was this black area then. It just looked like something weird was done to the lens, and it didn't look like it should, like a factory would look. So I got rid of the black paint, and instead I put duct tape in here, and I think that will work because it blocks the light so that no light will go through the red lens area, and that should do the trick. I wanted to use this chrome tape I have, but it's old and it won't separate from its backing. So if I had more of that, that would probably even be better, because that would reflect the LED lights more in its own bucket and make even more brightness. But right now, I'm not going to go buy some more of that tape. I'll just see how this duct tape works, and if I get a chance to get that other tape, maybe I'll replace that. But for now, the next step is to cut out my bow tie shapes out of this Mazda Miata taillight. Okay, so I've got the Miata taillight in my vise, and I kind of taped off where I thought the flattest spot would be to cut this piece out of. And then I put this thing on like this and traced it. And I guess the only thing is it's upside down, but that's okay. Won't it be? Or won't it fit? Wait a second. It's backwards, isn't it? If I cut that out that way, it's backwards. So I have to change the angles of these things and make them go the other way. Well, good thing I caught that. Okay, that's better. Got the thing in the right shape. I'm just gonna have to make sure I cut out a little bit larger so that I can file it down to the exact size I need to drop it in. So let's go. I'm using my Dremel tool. It's not really a Dremel, it's Craftsman, but moto tool. And I've got this like diamond type blade I found online somewhere. So let's see how that works for cutting into this plastic. Okay, so cut out pretty well. All I have to do now is file down the edges to make it slip into that shape. And it's gonna, I think it's gonna work perfect. So I'll get busy with the files and the sandpaper and see if I can get it to fit in there. Okay, so after a lot of filing, and sanding, and fitting and refitting, checking it over and over again a million times, I was finally able to get it trimmed down to where it's snapped into place. And I think it looks pretty good, you know, for a handmade item. If you look really close, it's going to be, you know, some problems, but it works pretty good. I think it's going to work great. So now I just have to finish constructing the container with the LEDs in it. I soldered the wires onto the LEDs that I had and wired them all together. I think I could have done a closer together job, but just kind of experimenting here. And then I fed them through 3 different holes. And I was using this ticky-tack just to keep it in position. And I think first now I'm gonna try to maybe put a little super glue in this edge just to keep that thing in there. Turned out pretty well. Okay, to seal up the lens so that it was, you know, waterproof, I mixed up some epoxy and I just kind of filled in the gaps with it from the inside so that now it's solidly in there, and you know, kind of looks sealed. So I think creation of this lens is done. Now I need to finalize my light box, figure out how I'm going to connect it to the wires inside the taillight bucket. Okay, so back at it. We've got the bow tie cut out of this taillight lens and sanded out pretty smoothly, I think. So now what we got to do is cut out the clear section the bow tie we're making out of this clear section of this old tail light assembly. And so we can cut that out, and then we'll glue it into this spot, and then we will construct a box that we're going to put the LCDs in, the LEDs in, to make our tail light, our backup light. So first of all, let's use our Dremel tool with this diamond saw blade and cut this piece out and sand it to fit in there. Okay, so now I need to create the box that's going to hold the 3 LED bulbs in this section of the tail light. So I made a template and I folded it all up and I fit it in there, and it fit in there nice and snug. And then I'll drill 3 holes and let the LEDs inside here, and the wires will come out of the hole. And so then I transferred this pattern to this aluminum. This is like a flashing type material, nice and easily cut with a pair of scissors. And so I marked out the pattern, and now I'm going to cut this out and fold it on the lines I need to make it fit in there, and we'll go from there. Alrighty, now we've got this little aluminum box created, and it's created to fit into the lower part of the taillight lens, and it's made to be flush with the edge, or a little bit under of the gasket, because there's no more room in the taillight bucket itself if it protrudes any more out. So it's made that depth on purpose. And it's also made to be able to tuck under this little edge you see going across here. There's an edge right there, and so the flat part right there tucks into that edge, and then once it's in place, I'm going to glue gun it in to make it a permanent part of the whole taillight lens component. So now that I've got this box created, I'm going to take 3 of these LED lights and wire them together, 1, 2, 3, to form a unit, a 3-element unit. I'm going to feed their wires out through this portion of the box and make them available for a connection to the wiring in the taillight bucket. So right now I'm going to work on soldering some wires to these LEDs and creating a unit of 3 lights to fit into this bucket. Alrighty, now I have the 3 LEDs all soldered up and placed into our little aluminum box. I decided to go with just 1 hole to make it simpler. And what I used for all this was, like I said, an LED light, this one here. And as you can see, at the base of the clear part, there's a little plus sign there, and there's a little negative on the other side. So you know that one's the positive and one's the negative. So the negative is the ground and the positive is the line. So what's important is that you wire the positive to the positive and the negative to the negatives. And what I was able to use for wiring was, I had this extra coil left over from my garage door opener. It's the wire that you send to the electric eye that keeps the door from hitting objects as it goes down. Anyway, this is the right gauge of wire that fits perfectly into the holes in these LEDs. So, and you can see one side has a black stripe on it and the other side is just white. So I determined that the black stripe side will always be the negative and the white side would be the positive. And so then I passed, you know, some of the wire through one of these holes on each side and pressed it down, and then soldered it there, you know, soldered it in. And that's what I have here. You can see the plus and minus there on those. And then the three sets of wires coming out, and they each have a black wire and a white wire. So after I soldered the wires on, I used a little piece of this shrink tubing and covered up the soldering and the wires so that none of it would short out against the aluminum box that I made. And what works really good for shrinking this shrink tubing is one of these little torches. It's nice and handy, fires up instantly, and really works great to shrink this shrink tubing. So my next thing is to wire these three different LEDs into one wire. I think I'll just take the center wire, and then I'll take the negative of this lamp and wrap it around the negative of the center one. And the same thing for the negative on the right side lamp. I'll wrap it around the negative of the center one. The same thing with the positive. So these will all be tied together into one, and then I'll just have one main lead that I will connect to the wiring in the truck. So for now, I'm going to trim back some of the wiring so that I can wrap it around these parts, and I'll probably solder them and then cover them up with some other shrink tubing, probably some of this white stuff. And then once all that's done and I test it, make sure the lights go, I will place it into the lens like that, and I will glue gun it in there like permanently, and we'll be set to go then. Okay, so me and my rush to get this project completed, I forgot one important step. I had placed this in there, and I went ahead and glue gunned it in real nice and tight, and it was really nice. And then I realized, wait a minute, I forgot to put the duct tape in that shields that part of the lens from the LED lights, so that when the backup lights go on, I only want the white thing to be glowing, not this part, which would be red. So in order to make that happen, I have to block out this section of the lens so that when this new box of light is inserted, the light will only go through the bow tie shape. So I just stuck this duct tape in now, and I'm going to trim it. And of course I'm going to cut out the bow tie shape so that the light can go through there. And then when that's all done, then I can glue this thing back in. Always in a hurry. Okay, so this right here is the switch that I installed on the steering column that gives you the power for the backup lights. I don't know if it's the neutral safety switch or something, I don't know what it's called, but it works for giving you the power to the backup lights. When you shift into reverse, it sends power to one of these lines, the 12 volts of power to one of these lines, and then you just add this wire through the back of your truck to the tail light, or to the backup lights if you got backup lights. In my case, it's going to go into the tail light bucket. And then here is where the wire's coming out to go into my tail light bucket. And these are the wires to light up my backup lights. And it's being fed by the wire that's coming from the front of the truck. I can't remember if it's the blue or the yellow. I guess it's the yellow wire. And it's giving me power for the backup lights, but I've also tied in the power that goes to the backup lights to power the backup camera. So backup camera gets its power from the backup lights. So I've got wires that connect the backup lamp in here to the backup camera, and also to the backup light in this lens, in this tail light. But that's how I got it wired together. And if I want to remove this lens, I just have to disconnect these wire connectors to disconnect the lens. I need to take that out for any reason. This is how this one ended up. This was my first one I made. It's not as nice as the second one, but it still functions just as well. So there we are. Okay, so we've got it. We've got custom backup lights on my 65. That works good. Okay, so as part of my custom backup light project, I also installed a backup camera in my 65 Chevy truck. And since I was running wires to the back, the tail lights for backup lights, I thought, well, it's the perfect time to add the backup camera, because the camera gets the power from the backup lights. Okay, so I installed the camera in this steel case that I made, and I bolted it to the other side of the bumper. But I don't like how it looks that way. It kind of looks like a trailer hitch or something, and it's not. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut a hole in my bumper, a square hole, and I'm going to recess the camera into the rear bumper. My plan is to repaint my bumper anyway, so now's the time to do this work. So I'll just need to cut a hole and then modify my metal can here. I'll make a new one that I'll weld in from the back and then place the camera in there, and it'll be in the bumper instead of hanging below. So that's what I'm going to do next. Okay, so got my bumper off, so I can more easily cut a hole in there and install my camera. This is the camera I'm going to use. Just going to cut a square hole in the bumper right there and set it in. This is the box I made for it initially that I don't like, but it would have worked. But I really want it to be right in the middle of it. My truck is already lowered a little, so this thing just is getting way too low to the ground anyway. So I'm gonna move it up an inch or so to the middle of the bumper. So what I need to do is figure out where the middle is, copy that square shape, cut it out. I'll probably try to put this thing in from the back and weld it in. Won't need this part anymore because I already made the wire exit hole. That should still work. Tough part about this was getting the bumper off. The original bolts were so rusty that I tried using a breaker bar, and I got them to start loosening. At least one of them, maybe this one, started loosening, but then it started turning in the hole and stripping out the hole of the bumper. So I didn't want to do that. So what I ended up doing was cutting the head of the bolt off. And to do that without damaging the bumper, I used my 3-inch angle grinder with a cutoff wheel, and I just cut 4 ears off the bumper bolt. You can see they're square, so if you can cut each of those ears, so to speak, off the head of the bolt, then the bolt can get pushed through the bumper and it'll just fall out the inside, you know, out the back. So that's what I did. It went pretty quick. Didn't really damage the bumper at all. A couple little scratches here that will most likely be covered up with the new bolts, which I'm very happy about. I just happen to have a set of new chrome bumper bolts, which I will use. That's not the chrome one, here's the chrome ones. So that'll look better anyway, especially if I end up painting the bumper, which I don't think I'm going to do this round, but eventually I'm going to. But that's where I'm at. So next thing to do is mark and cut the hole in the center of the bumper. Okay, so I've got my spot taped out and I've got it marked and drawn out a square, roughly the right size shape. So the next thing is I think I'm going to start drilling a bunch of holes inside that shape there. And unless I use my angle grinder again, maybe I'll do that. Can't go very deep with it without hurting the rest of it, but I'll give that a... Okay, so we're back at it. I've got the hole all cut out and filed down so that this container I made fits in it. It's gonna go flush, almost flush, and the bottom will stick out a little bit. And I'm just gonna spot weld it from the back side so you don't see it. I'll just tack it a couple of sides, get it solid in there. And that'll do it. This is something I made from this piece of square tube I had. I think it was the leg of something, a desk or something, but I've kept it and been able to use it for different projects. And it turned out to be the perfect size to put my backup camera into. So I cut a section and then I cut an angle and bent this part of it down and welded it on. Kind of ugly job, but who cares? It's not going to be seen. And then I drilled a hole and put a grommet in the back so the wire can come out. And originally I had it mounted under the bumper, but I don't like how that looks, so I'm going to insert it into the bumper like that. So it's not as noticeable. And it's not so low then. So next thing to do is to weld this guy on. Okay, so let's see how these backup lights work. Let's turn the ignition on. And let's put the lights on, make sure the tail lights work. Yep, they're working. Okay, now go back. Let's put it in reverse first. See the radio? Let's put it in reverse. There's the backup camera. It's working. So that means the backup lights should be on too, right? And yes, they are. They're working pretty good. So I think we have blast off. We're good. Having this backup camera is really going to be nice. Being able to back up. Well, my other new vehicles all have them, and I really miss them when I drive my truck, so now I'll have it in this too. So I'll put her back in park. Turn the lights off, turn the key off. We're good to go.